The humidity of a New Orleans Sunday clings to you. It's a physical weight, a wet wool blanket that smells of damp stone, jasmine, and the faint, sweet decay from the river. St. Inez above ground isn't a peaceful place. It's a city of the dead, and the tombs rise around me like silent, watchful neighbors. I've been 24 years old for 3 months, but I feel closer to 40. Working the night prep shift at a downtown bistro does that. It makes a ghost of you. Maybe that's why I don't mind the cemetery. We're all just haunting. My fingers trace the simple, carved letters, Ilara Alvarno. The tomb is too simple for the name. The Alvarnos own half the waterfront, the consortium, a word whispered by suppliers and truck drivers. But her marker is plain granite, unadorned, almost humble. I crouch, my knees cracking in the damp, and lay the small bouquet down. Purple morning glories. I've brought them every Sunday for 5 years, rain or shine. Today, the sky is a bruised yellow, promising rain. I owe her. It's a debt that never shrinks. The sound of tires crunching gravel cuts through the heavy quiet. It's the wrong sound. Too slow, too heavy, not a tourist's rental, not a groundskeeper's truck. I freeze, my hands still on the cool granite. A car glides to a stop on the path not 20 feet away. It's a coupe, gleaming black as polished obsidian, with chrome accents that catch the sickly light. It looks expensive, dangerous, and entirely out of place. My heart gives a painful thump against my ribs. I start to rise, to make myself small, to disappear. The driver's door opens, not with a creak, but a heavy, expensive thud. A man gets out. He's tall. The first thing I notice is the suit, charcoal gray, tailored so precisely it seems less like clothing and more like a second skin. He moves with a stillness that is louder than any shout. He doesn't look at me. Not yet. He just closes the car door with a soft, final click. I know who he is. We all do. Cashin Alvarno. He's a story cooks tell when the lobster delivery is late, a name the managers utter when the protection payment is due, the quiet boss of the Alvarno consortium. He takes 3 steps toward the grave and stops. He's looking at the name on the granite, not the flowers. His profile is sharp, like something carved from the same stone he's staring at. Then he speaks. His voice isn't loud. It's low, a rumble, like stones shifting deep underwater. That's my wife's grave, too. The words hit me like a physical blow, not threatening. No, it's worse. It's a statement of fact, heavy with a power I can't begin to measure. The air crackles. The pressure drops. I scramble to my feet, wiping my damp hands on my jeans. I'm sorry, sir. I was just leaving. My voice sounds thin, ridiculous. He turns his head. His eyes finally land on me. They are dark, not black, but a deep, unreadable brown. He isn't angry. He's assessing, like I'm a column of numbers. You come every Sunday, he says. It is not a question. Around 4 o'clock. You always bring purple morning glories. He knows. He knows my schedule. A cold dread, separate from the humidity, sluices down my spine. How long has he known? A sudden, violent flapping of wings makes me jump. A flock of crows, disturbed by nothing I can see, bursts from the head of a nearby angel statue, their caws like rusted hinges. Far off, the bells of the St. Louis Cathedral begin their slow, evening chime. The air is so thick I feel like I could drown in it. I knew her, I stammer. A lot of people knew her, he replies, his voice still quiet, still impossibly calm. They don't come every week, not for 5 years. He takes a step closer. I take an involuntary step back. And that's when I see them. Over his shoulder, 2 men. They're walking up the main path, pretending to be tourists. But they're all wrong. Their floral shirts are too bright, their steps too deliberate. They aren't looking at the tombs. They're looking at us. Their eyes are hard. Their walks are predatory. Cassian sees my focus shift. His entire body tenses. Not in a big way, but in 1,000 small, coiled adjustments. His weight shifts to the balls of his feet. He doesn't turn around. Kestrel Union, he murmurs, so low I barely read the words on his lips. Before I can even process the name, he takes one half step to his left. It's a small, economical movement, but it places his body directly in front of mine. He's shielding me. The sound is sharp, unmistakable in the quiet cemetery, the metallic shing click of a switchblade opening. The first man lunges. He's fast. He closes the 10-foot gap in a blur, the cheap tourist shirt flapping as he raises the knife in a high, arcing stab aimed right at Cassian's chest. I expect a gunshot. I expect a messy, brutal fight. What happens is precise. Cassian's left hand shoots out, not to block, but to catch. He seizes the man's wrist mid-swing, his fingers locking on like a steel trap. The man's momentum is stopped cold. Cassian's right elbow comes up, a piston strike that connects with the man's jaw with a sickening, solid crack. The man's head snaps back. At the exact same instant, Cassian twists the wrist he's holding. He twists it hard. There's a wet, awful pop that cuts through the air. The man screams, a high, thin sound of pure agony. The switchblade clatters onto the stone path. It all happened in 2 seconds. As the first man begins to fall, a shadow detaches itself from the cemetery's main gate. A third man, one I hadn't seen. He's dressed in a simple black suit, holding a large closed black umbrella at his side. He moves with an eerie, silent purpose. He reaches Cassian just as the first attacker hits his knees. He pops the umbrella open, but not toward the sky. He angles it low and wide, a black shield blocking the view from the security cameras perched on the cemetery's front wall. It's a dance. Practiced. Perfect. The second Kestrel man hasn't been idle. He was circling, and now he lunges, aiming his own knife low at Cassian's exposed side, right where his kidneys would be. Cassian is still tangled with the first man. Pushing him to the ground, the new man, Nico, is focused on the cameras. Neither of them sees the second blade. But I do. My entire world has shrunk to the glint of that 4-inch blade. I'm shaking so hard my teeth hurt. I'm Marina Vale. I chop onions. I wash lettuce. I make stock. I am nobody. I can't. My hand shoots out. I grab a handful of that expensive, perfectly tailored charcoal suit jacket. No, the word is ripped from my throat. I weigh maybe 115 pounds. He must be double that, all solid muscle. But my yank is pure, terrified instinct. It's unexpected. It throws him off balance. He stumbles back a single step, crashing into me. The force of it almost knocks me over. For one bizarre second, I'm holding him up, my face pressed into the solid wall of his back. I can feel the heat of him, the corded muscle, and the faint, clean scent of starch and something metallic, like gunpowder. The second knife slices the air. It tears through the sleeve of his suit jacket, right where his side was a moment before. The blade finds only empty space. The attacker's eyes go wide with panic. He missed. His partner is on the ground, cradling a broken wrist. Nico is standing there, a silent executioner under his black umbrella. The second man doesn't try again. He turns and sprints, vanishing into the maze of white tombs. The first man, weeping in pain, scrambles to his feet and stumbles after him. Silence floods the space, heavier this time. Cassian straightens up. He doesn't look at me. He calmly adjusts the cuff of his shirt. Then he looks at the 4-inch tear in his suit sleeve. He seems more annoyed by the ruined jacket than by the attempt on his life. He gives a short, sharp nod to the man with the umbrella. Nico, handle the follow-up cleanly. Nico Pereira just nods once. He closes the umbrella with a snap, turns, and walks calmly after the 2 fleeing men. He doesn't run. His footsteps are silent on the gravel path until he disappears. The air is thick with the smell of ozone. Cassian Alvarno turns to me. I'm still standing there, my hand frozen in a claw, as if I'm still holding his jacket. My knees feel like water. The purple morning glories are crushed in my other hand, their stems snapped. His dark eyes scan me, from my worn-out sneakers to my trembling hands. He's not breathing hard. "Why the flowers?" he asks again. His voice is just as low, just as steady, as if nothing happened. I try to swallow. My throat is sandpaper. I knew her. "You said that. How?" I look past him, at Alara's name, at the promise I made. "I owe her," I whisper, the words barely audible. "She saved me. I owe her a debt money can't pay." His gaze sharpens, as if that answer means something to him. A low, deep rumble shakes the ground beneath my feet. Thunder. And then the sky breaks. The promised rain doesn't drizzle. It arrives in a sudden, violent sheet. The warm, heavy drops turn cold in an instant. My thin t-shirt is plastered to my skin in seconds. Cassian doesn't even flinch at the deluge. The rain slicks his dark hair back, but he just keeps watching me. "They weren't here for me," he says, and his words cut through the roar of the rain. "They were here for you." My blood turns to ice. "What? No, I'm nobody." "You were nobody," he corrects me, "until you came here. Every Sunday. Like clockwork. They were watching this grave. They saw you. And when I approached you, they thought you were passing me information. You flagged yourself. Now, you're marked." Marked. The word hangs in the air, heavier than any tombstone. He jerks his head toward the black coupe, its engine still humming. "Get in the car." I recoil. "I'm not going anywhere with you." "This isn't an abduction, Miss Vale," he cuts in, and for the first time, his voice is sharp, impatient. "This is me getting a marked person out of the crossfire. You stay here. The Kestrel sweepers will be back before Nico is even done. They will take you. And they will not be clean about it." He's right. The terror is so profound, it's almost paralyzing. But I know he's right. The Kestrel Union, I've heard the name. Whispered by truckers in the alley behind the bistro. Brutal. Final. I look at the simple granite grave. I look at the man who is Alara's husband, the man whose life I just saved, the man who is offering me the only sanctuary in the city. The rain is a waterfall. I'm shaking so hard I can barely stand. He opens the passenger door. I take one step, then another. I drop the crushed flowers at the base of the tomb. I nod. I get in the car. The leather of the seats was cool against my damp skin. The inside of the black coupe smelled like nothing at all. Not new car smell, not air freshener, just clean, sterile, expensive air, outside. The rain lashed the windows, turning the city of tombs into a watercolor blur of gray and green. Cassian Alvarno drove the way he moved with an absolute economy of motion. No sudden acceleration, no hard braking. He simply glided. We passed the dripping wrought iron balconies of the Frenchman Street area, the bars quiet in the Sunday deluge. The city felt empty, washed clean. I stared at my hands, still smeared with a little mud from the grave. I was in the car of the most dangerous man in New Orleans, having just watched him and his associate disable 2 armed men, and all I could think about was that I was getting his leather seats wet. "You're shivering," he said. He didn't look at me. He pressed a button on the gleaming black dashboard. Warm air, smelling faintly of heated metal, blasted my legs. I flinched, startled by the sudden comfort. The car didn't head downtown, toward my tiny apartment. It went toward the river, toward the new, gleaming part of the city that looked like it belonged in Miami or Dubai. He turned onto a private drive. A glass tower rose from the mist, a blade of steel and mirrored windows that seemed to cut the sky. The crescent spire. I'd seen it from the bistro, a monument to money I couldn't comprehend. We descended into an underground garage, sterile and white-lit. He parked not in a numbered spot, but in a wide space marked only with a black square. He killed the engine. The silence that filled the car was absolute. "They've been watching you for weeks." "Miss Vale," he said, his voice quiet in the confined space. "Today was the day they decided to move." "How did you know?" I whispered. "That I was there, that you should be there." I've been reviewing the security footage from St. Inez for 3 years, looking for anomalies. Your visits were consistent, too consistent. I came today to find out who you were." He paused. It seems the Kestrel Union had the same idea. He got out. I scrambled to follow. We didn't go to the main lobby. He pressed his thumb against a small, unmarked black panel on the wall. A click echoed in the concrete garage, and a set of brushed steel doors slid open, revealing an elevator. The Silent Seven, I'd heard the valets call it, the private lift. We stepped inside. There were no buttons, just a panel he pressed his thumb to again. The doors closed, and there was no lurch, no whine of cables, just a seamless, pressurized ascent. The doors opened again. The office was empty. It was less a room and more a vantage point. 3 of the 4 walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, 50 stories above the river. The city was a map of lights and fog beneath us. The furniture was sparse, a huge desk that looked like a slab of polished stone. 2 hard-backed chairs and nothing else. No papers, no clutter. No warmth. On the one solid wall, a single ornate silver frame hung. It was large, but it was turned around. The back of the canvas, with its wooden stretchers and staples, faced the room. It was a portrait of Alara. I knew it, and he couldn't bear to look at it. It was a wound, turned inward. He walked to the desk but didn't sit. He just stood, watching the rain strike the glass. "Explain the debt." My voice came out stronger than I expected. The cold, sterile air demanded facts, not fear. I was 19. 5 years ago, I worked for her. His head turned, just slightly. Alara didn't have employees. "Not for the consortium," I said. "I worked at Haven Row." His stillness was absolute. He knew the name. "It was a kitchen," I hurried to explain, the words tumbling out. "In the Bywater. In an old utility building she bought through a shell company. It was a secret. She funded it all. Cash. We served dinner, hot meals for homeless women, for people getting off the street. No questions, no forms, no judgment. It was safe." "I know what it was," he said, his voice rough. "I was a line cook. Just prep. Mostly. Alara, she wasn't just a name on a bank account. She was there, twice a week. She'd bring mint tea and talk to the women." I swallowed, the memory still sharp. Then the hurricane hit. 3 years ago. The city was chaos. We were serving hundreds a night, and one night a fight broke out. It wasn't just a fight, it was organized. Men started throwing chairs, breaking things. Someone pulled the fire alarm. "And the MID showed up," he finished, his voice flat. I stared. "How did you know?" "The Metropolitan Integrity Directorate," he said, the name tasting like acid in his mouth. "A Kestrel front, go on." "They didn't come to help," I whispered, the shame and anger of that night rushing back. "They came in force. They called it a riot. They cited us for critical fire and safety violations. They shut us down. They put chains on the doors that night." "The instigator," he said. "They needed someone to blame for the riot. They found things. In my locker. Fire accelerants, a box of burners, Kestrel tools. They were framing me. They wanted Haven Row gone, and they needed a reason." I looked at the turned-over portrait. Alara came down to the station. She paid every fine, cash. She presented evidence that I was working a double, that I couldn't have been involved. She had my charges dropped before they were even fully filed. She hid me. She knew Kestrel set me up. They wanted that property. "And the promise?" he asked, his voice low. "She knew they would watch her after that she'd drawn their attention. She told me to disappear, to become a ghost. But she wanted to know I was okay, that Kestrel hadn't found me." My voice cracked, but I held it together. "She made me promise. If you're alive, if you're safe, let me know. Leave me flowers, Marina, every Sunday, at St. Inez, purple morning glories. As long as I see those flowers, I'll know you're safe." I finally let out the breath I'd been holding for 5 years. I never saw her again. She died 2 weeks later, but I kept the promise. I had to let her know I was safe. Cassian turned away from me, his back rigid. He placed both hands flat on the stone desk, leaning his weight on them. He was looking down at the city, but I knew he wasn't seeing it. "Emid," he growled. The rage in his voice was a physical thing, a low-frequency vibration that filled the room. An agency that only gets funding from Kestrel donations. They used a civic badge to put her on Kestrel's radar. They led them right to her. He wasn't angry at me. He was angry at a world that had let this happen. A sharp digital beep cut through the sterile room, a dedicated line on his desk. He tapped a speaker icon. "Nico?" Nico's voice, clear and precise, came through the speaker. "Boss, I pulled the satellite archives. Kestrel has had an observation post in the building across from St. Matthew Inez for 3 weeks. They've been running audio and thermal." "Why?" Cashin's voice was clipped. "It wasn't for you. It was for her. The flowers. Your wife's ghost. They were waiting to see if anyone else was connected to Haven Row. When you approached her today, you confirmed the link. She's the last living witness to the Haven Row setup. They weren't trying to eliminate you, boss. They were trying to grab her." A cold sweat broke out on my neck. They were trying to take me. Cassian disconnected the call. The silence stretched. "You can't go home," he said. It was a final judgment. "You can't go to work." He hit another button on the console. "Prep for Million Wharf. Full lockdown. I'm bringing in a guest." He paused. "Yes. Her." He looked at me, his eyes dark, the anger banked but still burning. "You're being moved to a safe house. Vermilion Wharf. It's a converted warehouse on the docks." The fear was a cold knot in my stomach, but something else rose with it, anger. "No, I won't. I'm not a package. You can't just move me. I'm not a victim." He took 2 steps, closing the distance between us. He was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him, see the flecks of gold in his dark brown eyes. "You are right," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "You're not a victim. You're the one person left who can tie Kestrel to the Emid and the shutdown of Haven Row. You're the one person who kept a promise to my wife." He leaned in, just an inch. "In this city, Miss Vale, the truly good people, the ones who do the right thing when no one is watching, they aren't the victims. They are the first targets." I refuse to look away, so I hide. That's your solution. You lock me in a warehouse. "You'll be protected," he countered, "and you'll be useful. My team at the wharf, their cook walked out last week, said the hours were too intense." It was so absurd. I almost laughed. "You're hiring me as a chef." "It's a placement. You will cook for my security team. You will be under my protection, inside my walls. They will not get to you." "In exchange for what?" I shot back. "My silence, my life?" "In exchange for your memory," he said. "You will tell me everything you remember about Haven Row, every face, every mid-agent's name, every truck that made a delivery, and in return, I will find out who gave the order to frame you. I will find out who was responsible for Alara." My mind flashed to the cemetery, the crack of the man's wrist, Nico, walking away with that umbrella. "And you'll do it cleanly?" I asked, the word sharp. His jaw tightened. "I gave Alara my word I would try a different way. I won't use indiscriminate violence. Kestrel used a fake agency to destroy her work. I will use the real ones to dismantle theirs. A bargain. My safety for his justice. My memory for his peace." "I'm a cook, Mr. Alvarno," I said. "That's all I am." "That's all you need to be." He gestured to the elevator. The door slid open instantly, as if summoned by his will. We stepped back into the steel box. The descent was as silent as the ascent, just the 2 of us, suspended in a column of steel, surrounded by $1 billion of concrete. He was watching me. I was watching the numbers on the display count down. "A question," he said, his voice dropping, losing its hard edge. I looked at him. "What? Are you afraid of me?" The air was too close. I thought of his power. I thought of the man with the broken wrist. I thought of the turned-over portrait. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't shake. "I am. But I'm 24 years old and I work a prep shift. I'm afraid of my chef. I'm afraid of my landlord, and I'm terrified of the Kestrel Union." I met his gaze, holding it. but I am far more afraid of the men who use fake badges and clipboards to legalize their crimes. I'm more afraid of the men who shut down Haven Row. The elevator doors sighed open, revealing the white, sterile garage. The black coupe waited. A flicker of something I couldn't name passed through his eyes. Respect. Good, Cassian Alvarno said. Fear keeps you sharp. Let's go to the wharf. Vermilion Wharf wasn't a penthouse. It was a fortress. From the outside, it was just another faceless brick warehouse complex huddled against the Mississippi, smelling of river silt and damp cypress. But the rolling steel door we drove through was 3 inches thick, and it hissed shut behind us with the finality of a bank vault. The interior wasn't a garage. It was a staging ground. Black SUVs, a few motorcycles and men, and half a dozen of them, all dressed in the same quiet, practical black as Nico, moved silently, checking equipment. They nodded as Cassian passed, their eyes flicking to me for 1.5 seconds before dismissing me. Nico, who had reappeared as we were leaving the spire, led me up a metal staircase to a second-level living area. The kitchen is here, Nico said, his voice as flat and unadorned as the concrete walls. It's stocked daily. You'll cook for a rotating team of 8. Your quarters are through that door. Private bath, lock on the inside. You are not to leave this level without Cassian or myself. The space was industrial but clean, exposed brick, heavy wooden beams, and a long, professional-grade stainless steel kitchen that ran the length of the main wall. It smelled like wet wood, stale coffee, and safety. Then they left me. The adrenaline from the cemetery, from the tower, began to drain away, leaving a cold, hollow dread. My clothes were still damp from the rain. I was shaking, a deep, rattling chill that started in my bones. I walked to the kitchen. It was an instinct. When the world is ending, you make a roux. The pantry was stocked like an apocalypse bunker. Sacks of flour, rice, onions, celery. A walk-in cooler held vegetables, butter, and vacuum-sealed packs of andouille sausage and chicken. This wasn't a safe-house kitchen. It was a restaurant-grade setup. I pulled the ingredients. I found a heavy 10-gallon stock pot. I turned on the gas-ringed stove. The whoosh of the blue flame was the most normal sound I'd heard all day. I was halfway through chopping the holy trinity, the onions, celery, and bell peppers when my hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the knife. It wasn't just the cold. It was the crash. The image of that knife slicing through the air. The sound of the man's wrist popping. I gripped the steel counter, my knuckles white. You're still cold. I jumped. Spinning around, Cassian was standing 10 feet away, silent as the shadows he'd emerged from. He had shed the ruined suit jacket and was in his white shirt sleeves, rolled precisely to the forearm. He was holding a thin, black quilted jacket. It's new, he said, as if anticipating my refusal. Put it on. He didn't toss it. He walked over and held it out. I hesitated, then slid my arms into it. It was insulated, warm and smelled of nothing. I zipped it up, the small, mechanical sound echoing in the large room. My trembling subsided, just a little. Thank you. He nodded, watching me. Gumbo. It's what I know how to make. He leaned against the opposite counter, crossing his arms. He wasn't relaxed, but he was settled, watching. Elara loved the gumbo at Haven Row. She said you made it. My knife stopped. She told you that? She told me everything, except what mattered, where it was, who was involved. She knew I would intervene. His voice was low. She tried to keep her world separate from mine. She was good at it, I whispered, turning back to the vegetables. The thwack of the knife on the cutting board was a rhythm. She used to come in on Tuesday nights. She'd bring peppermint tea for the staff and sit with the women, just listening. She never acted like she was married to you. She just acted like Elara. I scraped the vegetables into a bowl. She had this laugh. It wasn't loud, but it started in her eyes. You'd see it before you heard it. A sound escaped Cassian's throat, a quiet, rough huff of air. She used to do that to me. She challenged me. Once. The first time we met at that ridiculous fundraiser, she said I looked like I'd never smiled. I glanced over my shoulder. His face was in shadow, his gaze lost somewhere in the middle distance. She dared me, he said, to go one full day, 24 hours, without giving a single order. To anyone, not my driver, not my associates, not even a waiter. I paused, a smirk touching my lips. How'd you do? I failed, he said, deadpan. In 15 minutes, I told my driver he'd parked too close to the curb, a shadow of a smile. So brief it was almost painful. Crossed his lips. She didn't let me forget it for 10 years. The silence that fell wasn't empty. It was full of her. We were two strangers, huddled in a concrete bunker, sharing a ghost. I started the roux, stirring the flour and oil in the heavy pot, my eyes focused on the color. He hadn't moved. I could feel his gaze on me. I looked at his hands, braced on the steel counter opposite. They were strong, clean hands, but on his right, spanning the knuckles, I saw a faint silvery line of old scar tissue, stitches, a reminder that the man in the $1,000 suit hadn't always been in Towers. Have you ever cooked? I asked, turning to the onions again. He blinked, pulled from his memory. I know. You live in New Orleans. You own half the city, and you've never even made a roux. I employ people who do. That's not the same. I grabbed another onion and a knife from the block. I slid them across the counter to him. You're going to chop this small dice. He looked at the onion, then at the knife, as if I'd handed him a live grenade. Cassian Alvarno, the man who had disarmed an attacker in 2 seconds, looked utterly lost. Like this, I said, grabbing my own knife and dicing another half, fast, efficient. He picked up the chef's knife. He held it wrong, like a club. He brought it down on the onion, which shot sideways off the cutting board and rolled onto the floor. I sighed. Okay, let's try that again. Hold the knife, yes, like that. Pinch the blade. Good. Now curl your fingers on your other hand, like a claw. He did. Awkwardly. He began to chop. It was brutal. Uneven. He was slow, clumsy, but determined. He was frowning at the onion as if it were a rival family. And then his eyes started to water. He blinked, rapidly. His frown deepened. He kept chopping, but his eyes were clamped shut. It stings, he growled, frustrated. A small, involuntary laugh bubbled out of my chest. It was a rusty sound. I hadn't laughed and I didn't know how long. He stopped, his head bowed, rubbing his streaming eyes with his free hand. Don't rub them, I said, my voice soft. You'll make it worse. I moved before I could think. I put down my knife. I stepped in, close to him, into his space. I reached up with my right hand. He flinched, his body tensing, but he didn't pull away. Gently, I placed my palm over his eyes. Everything stopped. I could feel his eyelashes, damp, brushing against my skin. His skin was warm. He wasn't breathing. I wasn't breathing. My hand was small against his face, under my palm. He was just a man whose eyes were burning from an onion. He wasn't the boss. He wasn't a killer. He was just Cassian. The sound of the rain hammering the tin roof of the warehouse filled the silence. The smell of the roux, toasting in the pot, was thick in the air. My thumb rested just above his cheekbone. I could feel the pulse in his temple, a steady, strong thump. I held it for 1 second, 2. Then I snatched my hand back as if I'd touched the hot stove. A jolt of electricity, sharp and terrifying, shot up my arm. Sorry, I whispered, backing away. He opened his eyes, clear now, and stared at me. The air between us was thick, changed. He didn't say anything. A sharp digital beep shattered the moment. Cassian snapped back to himself. He turned to a small, encrypted tablet on the counter I hadn't even noticed. He scanned the screen. The warmth, the vulnerability, vanished. The boss was back. Damn it! What? Nico just got a flag. The Harbor Compliance Office. They just fast-tracked a permit for a Kestrel-owned shell company. A refrigerated warehouse, Eastern Canal. He began to pace, rubbing the back of his neck. That doesn't make sense. It's too fast. Those permits take 6 months, minimum. What does it mean, Yi? It means they're connected. The MID gives them cover on the streets, but the HCO that gives them the water, that gives them the port. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes sharp. Kestrel is trying to legitimize a new supply line. They're not just moving product anymore, refrigerated freight that's for people, or high-end weapons. I leaned back against the counter, my mind racing. A fake agency. What? He snapped. The woman, I said, the memory hitting me like a flash. At Haven Row, weeks before the shutdown. She wasn't Emid. She came in. She said she was from food safety. A spot inspection. His focus on me was total. Go on. She wasn't right. She didn't check the freezers. She didn't check the dates. She asked about our delivery schedule, our suppliers, who locked up at night. She asked when the last drop-off was. Describe her. I closed my eyes, summoning the face. Tall, early 30s, blonde, but silver blonde, pulled back so tight it looked painful, an expensive gray suit, and her smile, it was like a knife. Cassian tapped the tablet. Nico, get up here. Nico appeared so quickly he must have been on the stairs. A woman, Cassian said. Early 30s, silver blonde, gray suit, works for Kestrel, cross-reference with the HCO and Emidi. Nico's fingers flew over his own device. He pulled up a database. Faces flashed by. Stop, I said, pointing. The face on the screen smiled that same sharp, dead smile. Valeria Crest, Nico said, his voice grim. Kestrel's lead counsel. She's also listed as a special advisor on the Gulf Commerce Coordination Board. She's the one who signs off on the HCO permits. She's the link, Cassian growled. She's the one who inspected Haven Row. She's the one who signed the permit tonight. She's running the entire logistics and influence wing of their operation. The wind howled outside, rattling the heavy industrial windows in their frames. The rain changed, turning from a downpour to a horizontal, angry assault. And then, a sound. A hard thwack against the glass, just inches from my head. It wasn't the wind. I looked, clinging to the glass, its rotors fighting the gale, was a small, black drone, no bigger than my hand. A single red light glowed in its center, aimed directly at me. Before I could even scream, Cassian moved. It wasn't a pull or a push, it was a pivot. His left hand clamped around my waist, his right hand grabbed my shoulder. He spun us both in one fluid, violent motion. He slammed me back against the solid brick wall, his body covering mine completely, a shield of muscle and heat. At the exact same instant, I heard a sound, not a gunshot, a suppressed, heavy phut. Nico was standing 10 feet away, a sleek, black firearm in his hand, aimed at the window. The drone exploded in a shower of plastic and sparks, disappearing into the storm. Silence. My face was pressed into the hollow of Cassian's shoulder. My hands were trapped between us. Flat against the solid wall of his chest, I could feel his heart, a heavy, frantic thump against my palms. It was either his or mine. I couldn't tell. He was breathing hard, the warm air ghosting over my hair. Are you hit? His voice was a rasp, a growl in my ear. I managed to shake my head, my face still buried in his shirt. He let out a shaky breath. He didn't move. He kept me pinned there, his body a shield, his head up, scanning the room, scanning the windows. I was enveloped in him. The smell of his skin, clean and metallic, the solid, unyielding strength of him. My entire world had shrunk to this, the smell of the roux in the pot, the sound of the rain, and the man holding me so tight it hurt. Slowly, his grip on my waist loosened. He pulled back, but only an inch. His hand stayed on my shoulders, caging me in. His dark eyes searched my face. The coldness was gone. The assessment was gone. They were dark, blazing, and focused entirely on me. You're safe here, he whispered, his voice rough. I stared back at him, my heart a parade drum in my ribs. I looked at the window, now just a pane of glass with rain running down it. I looked at Nico, who was already wiping down his weapon, disappearing again. I looked at Cassian. "Nobody is safe forever," I whispered, my voice shaking. "But tonight I want to believe you." He didn't move for a full 5 seconds. I was still pinned between his body and the brick wall, the space between us charged with adrenaline and the shock of his heat. My heart was a fist, beating against his chest. Finally, slowly, he released his grip on my shoulders and took one step back. The air rushed into the space he'd occupied, and I suddenly felt cold again, despite the quilted jacket. "Nico," Cassian said, his voice a low command. He didn't turn. "Sweep the perimeter. Find the operator. Get the wreckage. I want the data card from that drone." "Understood." Nico vanished from the room without a sound. I leaned against the wall, my legs unsteady. They knew I was here. "They knew I was here," Cassian corrected, his jaw tight. He was looking at the rain-streaked window, at the spot where the drone had been. "They were watching me. You just happened to be in the frame." He looked back at me, his eyes dark. "Valeria Crest. She's not just a lawyer, she's running their surveillance." He walked over to the stove and, with a startlingly domestic motion, picked up the long wooden spoon and stirred the gumbo. The roux had darkened to a perfect, deep chocolate. "This is good," he murmured, his back to me. "But this changes the game. They're aggressive, they're pushing, they just declared war." "With a drone?" I asked, my voice shaky. "With a camera," he corrected. "They don't want me dead. Not yet. They want to know who I'm with, what I'm planning." He turned around. "And now they have your face." The bluntness of it hit me. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was a photograph on Valeria Crest's desk. Cassian hit the comm on his tablet. "Bring them in, now." "Bring who in?" I asked, pulling the jacket tighter around me. "The Waterfront Council?" I expected men in suits like Nico's. I expected hard-eyed soldiers. The 3 people who entered the loft 20 minutes later looked like they'd been pulled from a miscast university faculty meeting. Nico led them in. The first was a small, older man in a rumpled tweed jacket with elbow patches, his white hair a chaotic halo. He was clutching a thick, leather-bound book. This must be the professor. The second was a young woman, maybe my age, with bright pink streaks in her hair, black framed glasses, and paint stains, not house paint, but bright aerosol paint all over her fingers. She carried a laptop covered in stickers. The third was a tall, thin man who blinked a lot. He wore a crisp white shirt and mismatched socks, one red, one blue. "This is Dr. Aris, Sketch, and Silas," Cassian said, gesturing to each in turn. "My counsel, this is Marina. She's under my protection." They all looked at me. Silas, the man with the socks, squinted. "Is she financial or logistical?" "She's a witness," Cassian said. "She's the link to Haven Row." That got their attention. "Food's ready," I said quietly, gesturing to the steaming pot. "We should eat." For the next hour, I served bowls of hot gumbo to the strangest war council in New Orleans. They ate standing, leaning against the steel counters, and they talked. "The money flow is clean," Silas said, the colorblind accountant. "That's the problem. Valeria Crest is smart. The Gulf Commerce Coordination, the GCC, is a legitimate federal entity. The donations Kestrel makes to it are public. But the GCC then funds projects. Dr. Aris, the professor, cut in, tapping his spoon. It gives grants. It gave a $2 million grant to the Metropolitan Integrity Directorate for Urban Renewal Monitoring and a $3 million grant to the Harbor Compliance Office for waterway security upgrades. So the GCC is their laundry, Cassian stated. It's their influence laundry. Sketch, the graffiti artist, said, her voice sharp. They buy the agencies. The MID gives them free rein on the streets like shutting down Haven Row. The HCO gives them the docks like that new refrigerated warehouse. They're buying legitimacy with federal dollars. Cassian looked at me. The plan. Alara's plan. She always said, Doctor, Aris murmured, that you can't fight a plague with a bullet. You need an antidote, a legal one. The Civic Oversight Tribunal? Cassian said. The name was new to me. The COT, Silas explained. Seeing my confusion, they're the only civic agency in the city that Kestrel, or anyone else, hasn't bought, mostly because they have no power and no money. They're just a bunch of stubborn old lawyers and activists who review public corruption claims. They can't do anything, but they can subpoena, and they're painfully, ridiculously honest. So we give them something to subpoena. Cassian said. He laid out the counter move. It wasn't about bullets. It was about cargo. We create a bait shipment, he said. A container, logged through the HCO, filed by a shell company of ours, inside. We don't put guns, we put a full copy of Silas's ledger, showing the Kestrel money trail. We send the real shipping manifest directly to the COT, anonymously. When Kestrel sees our shell company on the docket, Silas said, rubbing his hands, Valeria will have the HCO flag it for an irregular inspection. They'll seize it. But the trap is, the COT will have already received the manifest. When the container disappears from the dock, the COT has a legal trigger. They can subpoena the HCO's inspection records. They can subpoena Valeria Crest. It was a chess game, a high-stakes, million-dollar chess game played with shipping containers and paperwork. I stood there, listening to them talk about logistics and shell companies, and I felt useless. I was a cook. I'd been a target. Now I was just a witness, hiding in a bunker. Valeria Crest, I said, my voice cutting through their strategic chatter. They all stopped and looked at me. When she came to Haven Row, I said, my mind racing back, the food safety inspector. She had a clipboard. She made us sign a form, a preliminary compliance notice. So, Sketch asked. So, I said, I saw the same form last week. At the bistro, our fish supplier gets vetted by the Harbor Compliance Office, the HCO. He was complaining about the new paperwork. I looked at Cassian. It was the same form. I remember it because of the watermark. It was a bird, a heron, standing in the reeds. Cassian went absolutely still. His eyes locked on mine. The official watermark of the Harbor Compliance Office, and he whispered. She used an official current HCO form to inspect a kitchen doctor, Aris asked, confused. That's sloppy. No, Cassian said, a dangerous, quiet excitement in his voice. It's not sloppy, it's arrogant. She was running the same scam on Haven Row that she's running on the docks. She used the same tools. He looked at Nico, who had re-entered the room, silent as a ghost. Where's the Haven Row file, the one Alara kept? Nico pulled a thumb drive from his pocket. Always. Cassian plugged it into the large monitor on the wall. A scan of the document I'd signed 5 years ago flashed onto the screen. A civic aid and relief document, authorizing the delivery of emergency supplies to Haven Row. And there, in the corner, faint but clear, the heron watermark. She used the same printer, Cassian breathed. That's not a standard issue government press. That paper stock, that ink, it's high security, used for bonds, for permits. He traced the outline of the bird. If she used the same illegal press for her fake Haven Row documents and her new legitimate HCO permits. You're looking for the flaw, Sketch said, her eyes wide. Every press, every plate has a flaw, a tiny signature. Nico, Cassian ordered, get the portable UV scanner and a macro lens. While Nico went to retrieve the equipment, the room buzzed. Silas and Doctor Aris were already modifying the plan, incorporating this new evidence. Cassian walked over to me. The gumbo pot was simmering, the work done. He stood beside me, watching the slow bubbles. You're a good cook, Marina, he said, his voice quiet. You see the details. Alara was like that. She was, I agreed. He pointed to a stack of shipping manifests on a nearby table, part of his own research. My world is different. It's not about taste. It's about movement, logistics. He picked one up. Look, everyone sees the words, the origin, the destination, but I learned to read the spaces between the words. He traced a line of code. This number here, that's the container ID. This one, the ship. But this is the timestamp from the crane operator. And this is the weight verification. See how they're logged 4.2 minutes apart. This one 4.27. This one 4.24. It's a rhythm. A heartbeat, I whispered, understanding. A heartbeat, he confirmed. When a manifest is faked, they get the words right, but the rhythm is wrong. It'll be 4.22, 4.22, 4.22. A human is consistent. A computer forging a log is too consistent. You learn to listen for the heartbeat. I looked at him, at this dangerous man who saw poetry in shipping logs. I do that, I said. He looked at me, surprised. With a pot, I said, gesturing to the gumbo. You can't just follow the recipe. You have to listen right now. I tilted my head. The simmer is too fast. The flavors they're yelling. They're not blending. I reached over and dialed the blue flame down. Just a fraction. The rapid blob softened to a slow, gentle plup. Now, I whispered, they'll start to open up. You have to listen for when the flavors are ready to blend. It's a different kind of heartbeat. He stared at me. The air from the kitchen, from the onion chopping, from the drone attack, rushing back. He saw me, not as a victim, not as a witness, as an equal, a chef in a different kitchen. The buzzing of an anonymous, encrypted call on his tablet broke the spell. He answered. We only heard his side. Yes. A pause. His face hardened. Who is this? A longer pause. His eyes cut to me. How much? He disconnected the call, his knuckles white. What is it? I asked. That was a competitor, someone who dislikes Kestrel more than they dislike me. He just gave me a courtesy warning. About what? Valeria Cress knows she was seen. She knows you're with me. Kestrel has put a bounty on you, a large one, to be collected at the Fleur de Lune festival. My blood ran cold. The festival. That's in 3 days. You're not going, he said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. The council is gone, he said to his team, who were already packing up. Full lockdown, nobody in or out. No, I said. Cashin turned to me, disbelief on his face. Excuse me. No, I said again, my voice shaking but firm. I'm going to that festival. You are a target. You will stay here, where you are safe. You don't understand, I pleaded, the words catching in my throat. That festival, the Fleur de Lune Lara, she took me, just after I started at Haven Row. It was the first time in my life I'd ever seen the big parade, the first time I felt free, safe. I took a shaky breath. We have a tradition, part of my promise. I go to the bridge over the canal during the fireworks. I drop purple morning glories into the water. It's the Cajun way, for remembrance. His face was stone. I will not risk you for a ritual. It's not just a ritual, I cried, the passion surprising me. It's the promise. It's the same as the flowers at the grave. If I don't go, if I hide, then they win. They've already won. They took Alara, and now they're taking this from her, too. I have to go. We stared at each other, a silent, furious battle of wills. He was a man who commanded. I was a woman who had nothing left to lose but a memory. He finally broke eye contact, swearing under his breath. He paced to the window and stared out at the rain. Nico, he said without turning. Boss, double the security. I want eyes on every rooftop from the quarter to the canal. I want our people in the crowd, in police uniforms and dressed as tourists. I want snipers on 3 Namai 4 points. You and I will be within 5 feet of her at all times. He turned back to me, his eyes blazing. You will wear what I tell you to wear. You will go where I tell you to go, and the second I say run, you run. Do you understand me? I nodded, the relief so strong my knees buckled. I understand. Good, Nico said, a rare hint of humor in his voice. And try not to eat too many beignets. The sugar rush makes you unpredictable. Later that night, long after the council had gone and the wharf had settled into a silent, watchful hum, Nico brought me a dress bag. Mister, Alvarno's instructions, he said. Inside, on a padded hanger, was a slip of a dress. It was made of silk, in a color like smoke or fog. It was beautiful, delicate, and offered absolutely no protection at all. I held it against myself, looking at my reflection in the dark window. I heard a sound and turned. Cassian was standing in the shadows of the stairway, watching me. His face was unreadable, but his gaze was soft, appreciative. He looked at me, in that fragile dress, and for a second, he wasn't a boss. Then his hand went to his side. Under his shirt, I heard the faint snick of him checking the magazine on his firearm. He saw me watching. He didn't look away. He just nodded, once, and disappeared back into the darkness. The smoky silk dress felt like a whisper against my skin. It was nothing. A mist. The air of the Fleur de Lune festival was the opposite. It was a physical assault of sensation. The thick, sweet smell of powdered sugar from beignets, the metallic tang of the river, and the sharp scent of spilled beer. Zydeco music throbbed from 4 different stages, a frantic, joyful heartbeat that vibrated in my teeth. Paper lanterns, painted like moons and flowers, bobbed overhead, casting the screaming, laughing crowd in a chaotic, colorful light. My only anchor was the tiny, flesh-colored earpiece. "Stay left," Cassian's voice murmured, a low, calm vibration in my ear. "Nico is on the hotel roof. South quadrant, sketches in the crowd ahead, dressed as a harlequin. You are clear to the bridge." He was there, always. 5 feet away, to my left, he looked like any other tourist, handsome, bored. A man in a dark shirt waiting for his wife, but his eyes never stopped. They were mirrors, reflecting the crowd, analyzing every face. "Just close enough to look like a stranger," he'd said. "Close enough to save you." My heart hammered against my ribs. I was walking bait. I clutched the small, beaded bag in my hand, inside a lipstick, my keys, and the small bouquet of purple morning glories I'd hidden. I reached the wooden footbridge over the canal. The crowd was thick here, everyone jostling for a view of the fireworks barge. I pushed my way to the railing below. The water was black, reflecting the swinging lanterns like fallen stars. This was it. This was for Alara. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the flowers out of my bag. I leaned over the rail, holding the small purple bunch. "I'm safe, Alara," I whispered into the noise. "I'm trying." I let them go. They tumbled, end over end, and vanished into the darkness. How touching. The voice was a blade in the noise. I froze. I turned. Valeria Crest. She was exactly as I remembered, but amplified. The silver blonde hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant knot. The gray suit was gone, replaced by a dress made of silver sequins that clung to her like a second glittering skin. Her smile was sharp, bright, and held no warmth at all. "She loved this festival," Valeria said, her voice a low purr that cut through the music. She stepped closer, invading my space. Her perfume was expensive and sharp, like crushed citrus. Alara, she had such a soft spot for lost causes, stray dogs, broken birds, charity kitchens. My blood turned to ice. "People die for the things they love, don't they?" she whispered, her eyes glittering. I wanted to run, to scream. Cassian's voice was instant in my ear. "Do not engage, Marina. She's baiting you. Stay calm, Nico. Do we have eyes on her team?" Valeria smiled, as if she knew I was listening to someone else. She gestured, a dismissive wave of her hand. "Enjoy the show. It's the last one you'll—" Her hand, adorned with a heavy silver bracelet, passed inches from my face, and I smelled it. Under the cloud of perfume, under the smell of the river, faint, acrid, chemical, it was the ink, the same unique, sharp smell from the fake compliance forms at Haven Row. She hadn't just handled the documents. She'd been near them. Recently, she'd been printing. I inhaled, trying to confirm. "Boss?" Nico's voice crackled, urgent. "We have a problem. Signal overlap. They're running a mobile jammer. It's moving, pushing us. They're boxing us in, forcing us east, toward the fireworks barge." A new, cold dread. They weren't just watching. They were hurting us. "Eyes up." Cassian's voice was hard. "I need eyes on the high ground." A different voice broke in. "Sketch. Got 'em. Oh, hell. 3 of them. Rooftops, north, east, center. Kestrel spotters. They're carrying long cases. They're waiting for the fireworks, boss, to mask the shots. My heart stopped. 3 snipers. Cassian was beside me in a single, fluid motion. He didn't grab me. He just arrived. His body was a wall. Walk with me, normally toward that stone pillar. His hand was on the small of my back, a solid, burning pressure. They're watching. They're looking for panic. We took 2 steps, 3. The crowd was a wall of bodies. We reached the massive stone support pillar for the bridge. He turned me, smoothly, backing me into the deep, inky shadow it cast. He crowded me against the cold stone, shielding me from the rooftops. His head dipped. My body was rigid with terror. He was so close. I could feel the heat of him, the frantic rhythm of his heart matching mine. His lips brushed my temple. It wasn't a kiss. It was a breath, a whisper. "I've got you," he murmured against my skin. The words a vibration that went straight to my spine. He was using his body, his proximity, to hide me from 3 separate rifles. Valeria was still there, watching us, a look of cruel amusement on her face. She thought she was watching a lover's spat. She was blocking our only clear path. "We have to move now," Cassian whispered against my hair. "And we need confirmation. The flaw. Can you get it?" My bag, the tiny pen-sized UV scanner Nico had given me. "Just in case," he'd said. "Activate it and drop it. It'll do the rest." I took a shaky breath. "Valeria," I said, my voice trembling. I stepped out of the shadow, away from Cassian. "You're in our way." I stumbled as if on the uneven planks. My clutch slipped from my hand. I hit the small button on the side as it fell. The bag landed on her silver-heeled shoe, the invisible beam, a tiny, powerful ultraviolet light, shot up. It was aimed perfectly. It hit her wrist, the one with the heavy bracelet, the one that smelled of ink. For a fraction of a second, a ghostly, glowing heron appeared on her skin. But it was wrong. Just as Sketch had predicted, there was a tiny break in the wing, a microscopic line that wasn't supposed to be there. The Ridge 7 flaw. Valeria saw it. Her eyes snapped down. She saw the light. She saw the flawed watermark glowing on her own skin. She knew what it was. She knew that we knew. Her smile didn't just vanish. It inverted. The mask of civility shattered, revealing the pure, cold rage beneath. "Now!" she hissed. Not at us, but at someone I couldn't see. Boom! The first firework exploded, a deafening crack that shook the bridge. The sky lit up in a shower of green and gold. The crowd roared. Their faces turned to the sky. "Smoke!" Cassian yelled into his wrist. From the roof above, 3 small canisters dropped, landing in the crowd behind Valeria. Thick, white smoke billowed out, not fire smoke, but tactical cover. People screamed, confused, as the smoke enveloped the bridge entrance. Cassian didn't wait. He spun, grabbing me. "Get on my back, now!" I didn't hesitate. I jumped, my arms locking around his neck, my legs clamping around his waist. He was solid rock. He didn't even pause. He just ran. He plunged into the panicked crowd, using his shoulder as a battering ram, heading for the narrow wooden stairs at the far end of the bridge. "Hold on!" he roared. We were halfway across. The bridge was old, slick with river mist. A sharp ping echoed, louder than the fireworks. A bullet ricocheted off the metal support right beside my head. One of the snipers wasn't blind. Cassian jinked, hard. His foot slipped on the wet wood. We fell. We crashed sideways. He twisted, a violent, protective motion I knew too well. He took the impact. His back slammed into the iron railing with a sickening grunt that I felt through my whole body. I was on top of him, my arms still locked around his neck, my face buried in his shoulder. Safe. He was gasping. The air punched out of him. "Don't die!" I screamed, my voice raw with terror, the words ripped out of me. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. The fireworks exploded over his head, lighting his face in strobe of red and blue and green. A grin, pure and reckless and full of pain, split his face. "Not yet," He coughed, the words tight. "I still owe you that peaceful dinner." He was up again, dragging me with him. He didn't give me time to stand. He grabbed my hand, his grip like a vice, and pulled me along. We half ran, half fell down the narrow stairs, down an alley that smelled of old shrimp and garlic, through the beaded curtain of a back kitchen, the shout of a startled chef. We burst through a door and plunged down a set of narrow stone steps. We were in a wine cellar. Stone walls, racks of dusty bottles. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and fermented grapes. A single yellow bulb hummed overhead, far, far above. I could hear the muffled thump of a jazz trumpet and a walking bass line. The blue lamp, a safe point. A heavy steel door slammed shut behind us. Nico was there. He must have come another way. He slid a 4-inch thick deadbolt into place. Silence. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. Cassian slumped against the wall, his eyes closed, his chest heaving. The shaking started. It began in my knees and spread. My entire body was vibrating. A guitar string plucked too hard. My teeth were chattering. I couldn't form a word. Cassian opened his eyes. He looked at me, at my uncontrolled shaking. He pushed off the wall. He walked over to me. He didn't touch my shoulders. He didn't touch my waist. He just took my hand. His hand was rough, calloused, and impossibly warm. He didn't say anything. He just held it. He threaded his fingers through mine, his grip firm, grounding, a simple, solid pressure that said, "I am here. You are safe." He held it for a long, long time. Nico tapped his tablet. He brought up the scan of the fake Haven Row document. He hit a filter, applying the UV light simulation. He zoomed in on the heron. "The flaw," he said, his voice quiet. "It's exactly as you saw on her wrist, the Ridge 7 break." He looked at Cassian. "The hook is set. Boss, we have the physical link. We have the proof." Cassian was still looking at me, his thumb rubbing a slow, steady circle on the back of my hand. The evidence of our war was on the screen. But all I could feel was his pulse. His thumb was still rubbing slow, steady circles on the back of my hand. The gesture was doing more to stop my shaking than the 4-inch thick steel door. My pulse, which had been a panicked bird in my throat, was finally starting to slow, matching the steady rhythm of his. "The cellar is secure, boss," Nico said, his voice startling me. He was wiping down the data tablet. "But it's not comfortable. The attic apartment is clear. I've swept it." Cassian nodded, his eyes still on me. He finally unlaced his fingers from mine. The loss of his warmth was immediate and sharp. I curled my hand into a fist, trying to hold onto it. He pushed off the wall, wincing as his back protested. "Let's go. You need to get out of that dress." It wasn't a suggestive comment. It was a fact. The smoky silk was damp, torn at the hem from our run, and slick with river mist. I was freezing again. Nico led the way up a narrow, winding flight of stairs hidden behind a wine rack. The stone was cold under my flimsy shoes. The muffled sound of the jazz trumpet from the bar below grew clearer, a soulful, lonely sound that threaded through the walls. He opened a door at the top. The room was a hidden nest, a small attic, tucked under the slanted eaves of the old building. It smelled of old wood, lemon oil, and the faint, sweet scent of bourbon. A single, round window looked out over the alley, and the rain was tapping against it with a gentle, persistent rhythm. "I'll be at the bottom of the stairs," Nico said. "No one gets in." He closed the door, leaving us alone. The silence was thick, filled only by the rain and the distant, mournful trumpet. I stood in the middle of the small rug, shivering, suddenly aware of how I must look, drowned, terrified. My hand automatically went to the tear in the silk. Cassian saw the movement. He went to a small, dark wood armoire in the corner and opened it. Inside were a few folded, identical black shirts and one white one. He pulled out the white button-down shirt. "There's a bathroom through there," he said, nodding to a small door. "Change. It's clean." He held the shirt out, but as I moved to take it, he turned his back to me. It was a gesture of respect so profound, so unexpected. It stopped my breath. He was a man who commanded armies, who broke wrists, who faced down snipers. And he turned his back to give me privacy. I reached for the shirt, my fingers, still trembling, brushed against his, says, it wasn't just his hand, my fingertips grazed the skin of his wrist, right over the pulse point. It was like touching a live wire. I felt his pulse jump, a single, hard thump against my skin. He flinched, just slightly, a jolt, sharp and electric, shot up my arm. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned, the cotton shirt clutched in my fist. Thank you, I whispered to his back. He just nodded. Take your time. I fled into the small bathroom. I peeled the ruined silk dress off and let it fall to the floor in a damp puddle. I stood in his shirt. It was huge, falling to my mid-thighs, the sleeves so long I had to roll them up 4 times. It smelled like him, that clean, sharp, impossible scent of laundry starch and something metallic, like the air after a storm. I felt safer in that shirt than I had in the entire Vermilion Wharf complex. When I came out, he was standing by the round window, his shoulder leaning against the frame, watching the rain. The single yellow lamp in the room cast long shadows. It's quiet, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I felt small in his shirt. It's the oldest safe point in the city, he said, his voice a low rumble, blending with the jazz. The blue lamp. Alara, she loved this room. She said the rain on the roof sounded like someone typing a long story. The mention of her name hung in the air between us. It wasn't a ghost this time. It was a bridge. I walked to the window, standing a few feet away from him. She was your harbor, wasn't she? He was silent for a long time, watching the water trace paths down the glass. She was, he finally said. His voice was rough, thick with a loss so deep I could feel it. I built the walls. I bought the guns. I made the city respect us. But she was the peace inside it. She was the one place the storms couldn't reach, the one good thing. I looked down at the wooden floor. She was my lighthouse. The one light that showed me there was a shore. She didn't just save me from Kestrel, Cassian. She gave me a purpose, a kitchen. She was the first person who ever saw me. He finally turned from the window. His face was in shadow, but I could see the glint of his eyes. The pain there was raw, unguarded. She was the best of me, he whispered, and I didn't know why I did it. Maybe it was the rain, or the jazz, or the shared grief. Maybe it was the simple, terrifying fact that he had thrown his body in front of a bullet for me. I took one step. My bare feet were silent on the rug. His eyes snapped to mine, reading my face, and he didn't move. He didn't breathe. I'm not demanding anything, Marina, he said, his voice hoarse. He thought this was a payment, gratitude. I shook my head, my heart hammering so hard I thought he could hear it. I know. I took another half step. We were inches apart. The air between us was electric, charged with the thunder outside and the adrenaline inside. This isn't a debt. My voice was a whisper. I'm choosing. He searched my eyes, looking for any hint of fear, of coercion. He found none. He lifted his hand, the one with the scarred knuckles, and he did it so slowly, giving me every second to pull away. He didn't grab. He didn't demand. He just laid his hand on my shoulder blade. His touch was hesitant, respectful. His palm was warm through the thin cotton of the shirt. It wasn't the grip of a boss. It wasn't the panic clutch of the chase. It was a question. I leaned into his hand, just an inch. That was my answer. My own hands came up. They felt small and shaky. I laid them on the solid muscle of his chest, then slid them up, over his shoulders, until my arms were looped loosely around his neck. I could feel the tension in his muscles, the rigid control he held over himself. He leaned in. The first kiss was impossibly soft. It was as soft as the rain on the glass. It was hesitant, warm, and tasted of the storm and the smoky air of the festival. It wasn't the kiss of a Mafia boss. It was the kiss of a man who was afraid, not of bullets, but of this. It was a question, an answer, a breath. His other hand came up, tracing the line of my jaw, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. His touch was rough, calloused, and gentle all at once. My fingers tightened in his hair, just slightly, pulling him a fraction closer. His breath, warm and sweet, mingled with mine. The kiss deepened, just a little. It wasn't frantic, it was a discovery, a slow unfolding. Then we both pulled back, just an inch. We were still in the embrace, foreheads almost touching. A small, shaky smile touched my lips. I couldn't help it. He saw it, and the most amazing, foreign, awkward smile touched his own mouth. It was like a muscle he hadn't used in a decade. It was the most human I had ever seen him. "My legs feel like they're going to give out," I whispered. "My back," he countered, his voice rough, "feels like it was hit by a truck. I'm not 20 anymore." I laughed, a real quiet laugh. There was an old, overstuffed floral couch against one wall, piled with cushions. A thick wool blanket was draped over the arm. He let go of me, reluctantly, and sat on one end, wincing as his bruised back hit the cushion. I sat on the other end, pulling my knees up, trying to hide my bare legs under the hem of his shirt. He watched me, then reached for the blanket. He unfolded the heavy wool and, in a gesture that was almost domestic, he draped it over my legs, then he pulled the other end over his own. We sat there, in a quiet attic, under one blanket, listening to the rain. The jazz trumpet downstairs started a new song, a slow, bluesy ballad. "You need to rest," he said. I was exhausted, but my mind was spinning. The chase, the flawed watermark, Valeria's face. "Tell me something," he said, his voice a low rumble, blending with the bass line from the bar. "Tell me something that isn't about this. Tell me about the kitchen, the one at Haven Row." I leaned my head back against the cushion. "Why?" "I need to hear a different story." So I did. I started to talk. I told him about Old Man Hemlock, a homeless vet who would only eat red foods. I told him how Alara had me make a special plate every night with beets and roasted peppers, and once strawberries in the dead of winter that must have cost a fortune. As I talked, my eyelids grew heavy. I was so tired. I slid down, just a little, and my head found his shoulder. I tensed, about to move. "It's okay," he murmured. He didn't move, but his arm, the one I was leaning against, felt like solid rock. I rested my head there. It felt steady. I kept talking, my voice getting sleepier. I told him about the night shift, about the ghosts, and he just listened. His breathing slowed, matching mine. His hand, the one that wasn't trapped under my head, found mine under the blanket. He didn't grab it. He just held it, his fingers laced with mine. Trust. I must have dozed off. A brilliant flash of lightning lit the room in a stark, white glare. It was followed an instant later by a crack of thunder so loud it rattled the glasses on the shelf. I bolt upright, ripped from sleep, my heart pounding, convinced it was a gunshot. "What?" "It's just the storm." Cassian's voice, instant and calm in the dark. He was awake. He hadn't been sleeping at all. "Just the storm. Marina, you're safe. I have Nico at the door. 2 men on the street. No one is getting in." I let out a shaky breath, sinking back down, but I was trembling again. I instinctively put my free hand on his chest, a reflexive need to touch something solid, to confirm he was real. I felt his heartbeat. It wasn't the frantic, pounding thump of the chase in the wine cellar. It was slow, steady, strong, a quiet rhythm beneath my palm. It was the opposite of the storm. He looked down at my hand on his chest, then up at my face. The dim light from the lamp caught his eyes. The look it had changed, the respect, the protection. It was all still there, but there was something new, something solid. The look he'd given me had shifted, from cooperation to commitment. He leaned in again. This kiss was different. It wasn't hesitant. It was deliberate. It was deeper, warmer. It was a promise. It said, "I am here. I am not leaving." I kissed him back, pouring all the fear and the relief and the strange, terrifying hope of the last 3 days into it. A tiny, discreet beep came from his earpiece. We both froze, pulling apart, annoyance and duty warred on his face. He tapped his ear. "What?" He listened, his jaw tightening. "Good, hold the perimeter. Let them run." He looked back at me. The spell was broken, but the connection wasn't. "Trouble," I whispered. "No," he said, his voice rough. He even looked pleased. "The opposite. Nico picked up the Kestrel sweepers. They're disorganized. They're running blind. Valeria overplayed her hand. They lost us." He stood up, wincing, and pulled the blanket up over my shoulders. He walked to the window, staring out at the rain, his back to me. "When this is over," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "When the Seat has the evidence and Crest is handled, I'm still taking you to that dinner." I smiled, pulling the warm wool tight. "The peaceful one you owe me." He turned, and that small, real smile touched his lips again. "I'm a man of my word." "Good," I said, my voice suddenly feeling light, almost brave. "Because I'm going to want dessert, too." His smile widened. "I'll see what I can do." The attic at the Blue Lamp felt like a dream. Vermilion Wharf was the reality. We returned before dawn, slipping through the city's quiet, gray streets, the moment the 3-inch steel door hissed shut behind us. The intimacy of the attic, the shared blanket, the scent of the rain, it all evaporated. We were back in the fortress. The war was on. Cassian was different. The brief, awkward smile was gone, replaced by a cold, sharpened focus. He hadn't just been bruised by the fall, he'd been galvanized by it. He'd kiss me in the dark. But in the light of the warehouse, he was the boss. And I was no longer just a witness. I was a partner. "Eris, Silas, sketch," he barked into the comm. "My office, 10 minutes. I spent the next hour in the kitchen, not as a chef, but as a witness. I sat at the steel table while Cassian and his counsel assembled the weapon. It wasn't a gun, it was a simple sealed courier's bag. The scans of the fake Haven Row documents, Silas, the accountant, confirmed, ticking a list. The macro shots of the Ridge 7 flaw from the festival, the corresponding flaw in the Kestrel warehouse permit, they're identical. "And the money trail, Doctor," Aris added, his eyes bright. "The GCC grants to the EMID and the HCO, cross-referenced with the dates Valeria Crest's shell companies got their expedited permits. It's a perfect circle." Cassian sealed the bag himself. "Nico, you will deliver this to the duty clerk at the Civic Oversight Tribunal. By hand, no courier. You will request a receipt, and you will give them one condition." "Condition, boss?" Nico asked. "Any hearing that results from this evidence," Cassian said, his voice cold, "must be public. No closed-door sessions." "Doctor," Aris raised an eyebrow, "that's aggressive. Cassian, that's sunlight. It gives them nowhere to hide." "That's the point," Cassian said. "Alara's name has been in the shadows for 5 years. I'm putting it in the light. Go." Nico vanished. I sat there, my hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. I felt useless again. They were running the high-level plays. I was just the girl who'd made the gumbo. "They have your data," I said, my voice quiet, "but they don't have the story." Cassian turned to me. "What story?" "The why. Why Alara did it. Why Haven Row mattered. They have the what, but I have the who." I spent the next 2 days on the phone. Cassian set me up with an encrypted line. I called numbers I hadn't dialed in 5 years. I spoke to women who were now waitresses, mothers, janitors, all survivors who had passed through Alara's kitchen. I gave the leads to Sketch. She, the graffiti artist with the pink hair, was the team's heart. She was the one who could go into the neighborhoods and not look like a threat. She came back with recordings, not audio, but written transcripts. She'd sat with them, just like Alara used to. I read them, and the tears I hadn't shed in the attic finally came. Miss Agne, now 70, remembered the night of the flood. The water was high, she'd told Sketch. My legs gave out, and that angel, Alara, she didn't call for help. She just hiked up her own skirt, threw me on her back, and carried me 3 blocks to the shelter. She cussed like a sailor the whole time, too. And little Tito, who was now 16. I don't remember much, but I remember her, the lady with the smiling eyes. She always gave me extra bread, but she made me promise to eat the vegetables first. She was the only one who didn't look through me. I was building my own case, a case made of bread and mint tea and a bad back from carrying an old woman. Valeria Crest didn't wait. She knew the Siat package had arrived. Her counterattack was immediate and brutal. Sketch turned on the television in the main room, and there she was, Valeria, in a crisp, ice blue suit, standing in front of the Crescent Spire. She was giving an exclusive interview to the Gulf Coast News. A baseless, desperate smear campaign. She was saying, her face a mask of professional concern, the Alvarno Consortium, which has operated in the legal gray area of our city for decades, is attempting to disrupt legitimate port commerce. Mr. Alvarno is lashing out, fabricating evidence to cover his own illegal import-export schemes. The reporter, a woman with a plastic smile, nodded. So, you're saying these accusations against the EMID and the HCO are a smokescreen? Of course, Valeria said, her smile like a blade. Cassian Alvarno is a man who deals in violence. He's angry, he's grieving, and he's trying to burn the city down with him. It's tragic, really. I threw my coffee cup. It shattered against the brick wall. She's calling him the monster. She's using Alara's name against him. Cassian walked into the room, took one look at the TV, and turned it off. Don't, he said, his voice flat. That's her territory. The airwaves. She's good at it. We won't beat her there. So we just let her say that, I seethed. No, he said. We don't play her game. We play ours. He turned to Sketch. Launch it. Launch what? I asked. The open warehouse, Sketch said, her fingers flying across her laptop. The sticker-covered machine was hooked up to a secure server that bounced its signal through 24 countries. Cassian's counterpunch. She turned the monitor. A stark black and white website appeared. No name, no logo, just a single search bar. She typed in the name of Valeria's shell company. Beep! A screen populated with data. The UV scans of the Ridge 7 flaw, the internal schedules for the random inspections, the exact timestamp of the permit approval for the Kestrel warehouse, logged at 2:14 in the morning. It's not an accusation, Cassian explained, watching the screen. It's just the data. We're not telling a story. We're just opening the ledger. Let the Port Authority, the shipping companies, the customs officials, let them see the flaw. Let them see how Kestrel cut the line. The effect was immediate. By that afternoon, the first cracks appeared. A spokesperson for the Harbor Compliance Office issued a panicked statement, blaming data entry errors by a single rogue employee. The EMID followed suit, announcing an internal investigation into procedural irregularities. They were cutting their losses. They were isolating Valeria. Now, Cassian said, turning to me, it's your turn. He was right. He'd given them the data. I had to give them the heart. Sketch set it up, a local podcast, The Silt, known for its independence and its deep roots in the city's neighborhoods. It was anonymous. I sat in a soundproofed room in the wharf's basement, a voice modulator making me sound like a stranger. I didn't mention Kestrel. I didn't mention Cassian. I didn't even mention the M&D. I just told the truth. It was called Haven Row. I began. My voice, altered but steady. But we just called it the kitchen. It was a place run by a woman who smiled with her eyes. It was a place where you could get a hot meal, and no one would ask you for your name. You were just safe. I told them about Miss Agni. I told them about little Tito, and then I told them about the promise. She knew she was in trouble. She made me promise to bring purple morning glories to St. Inez every Sunday, just so she'd know I was still safe. I've kept that promise for 5 years. My voice cracked, and I didn't try to hide it. They shut the kitchen down, but they can't shut down the memory. This city, it needs its kitchens. It needs its safe places. The podcast aired at 6 o'clock. By 7, the Open Warehouse website had so much traffic it almost crashed Sketch's server. By 8, flowers bouquets of morning glories were appearing at the gates of St. Inez. The city was listening. Nico returned just before midnight. He'd been a ghost for 2 days. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were alive. He placed a small, black audio recorder on the table. "They're panicking," he said. "Valeria called an emergency meeting at a public restaurant. She was careless." He pressed play. We heard the clatter of silverware, the murmur of a restaurant, and then Valeria's voice. Not the smooth, professional purr from the television, but a low, vicious hiss. "I don't care about the flowers. I don't care about the website. It's just noise. I can handle the truth. What I'm afraid of is the truth being told at the right tempo." That was it. The confession. Not of a crime, but of the conspiracy. Cassian just nodded. He copied the file. He sent it to the Siet. The next morning, the summons arrived. A public hearing was scheduled. In 1 week. We had won. For about an hour. The safe house, which had felt like a base of operations, suddenly felt like a cage. The victory made us targets. "The warning was clear," Cassian said, pacing the length of the main room. "Kestrel is done playing with the media. They've lost the legal battle. They only have one move left." "They'll come for me," I said. It wasn't a question. "They'll try," he said. "Before the hearing, they take you. They have leverage. They force me to retract the evidence. They silence the star witness." "So, what do we do?" I asked. "Barricade the doors?" "No," he said, stopping in front of me. "We let them. We set the trap." My blood ran cold. "What trap?" "The Heliotrope Night Market. Tomorrow night, it's the biggest open-air market of the season. We leak a rumor, a credible one, that the mystery witness from the podcast, the cook from Haven Row, is doing a charity cooking stall to raise money for a new kitchen." I recoiled. "Bait. You want to use me as bait. The intimacy of the attic, the shared trust, it all shattered. I am not your pawn, Cassian. I won't be." "I know," he said, his voice quiet, intense. He didn't raise his... He stepped closer. "This isn't me using you. This is me trusting you. They will be desperate. They will come in sloppy, and they will be loud. We take them, not in an alley, but in a public market, with 500 witnesses. We end it, cleanly." I stared at him, my fury battling my fear. "And if they're not sloppy, what if they just shoot me like at the festival?" "They won't," he said. "They need you alive." He pointed to a large map of the city he'd put on the wall. "Heliotrope Market." I looked at it, and my chef's brain, my prep cook brain, took over. "I know this market," I whispered. "I worked a produce stall there 2 summers ago. I know the layout." My fear began to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. "You're wrong about the entry. They won't come from the main gate. Too many people. They'll come from here," I said, jabbing a finger at the map. "The service alley, behind the fishmongers. It leads right to the main plaza. It's a clean line of sight." I looked at him. "The fish stalls, they have industrial walk-in freezers. And the garbage disposal alleyway, it's a perfect funnel, a choke point. If they grab me, that's where they'll go." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Cassian's face. He was seeing it, too. "Yo, this isn't your trap, Cassian," I said, my voice gaining strength. "It's mine. I'm not the bait. I'm the chef, and I'm in my kitchen. They come for me. They play by my rules." He just stared at me for a long moment. That look of surprised respect I hadn't seen since the wharf kitchen returning to his eyes. He reached into his pocket and took out a small, black velvet box. My heart did a stupid, ridiculous flip. I opened it. It wasn't a ring. It was a necklace, a delicate, modern silver chain with a single, teardrop-shaped charm made of brushed platinum. "It's a locator," he said, his voice soft, "and a panic button. The sides are pressure-sensitive. You squeeze it, twice, and my entire team, 20 of them, will descend on that market in 30 seconds." He took it from the box. "Turn around." I turned, my back to him. I lifted my hair. His fingers, calloused and warm, grazed the skin on the back of my neck as he fastened the clasp. The metal was cool. His touch was fire. It wasn't a gift of love. It was a piece of tactical equipment. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done for me. I turned back to face him. He didn't step away. His hands came up to rest on my shoulders, his grip firm. "I need you to trust me, Marina." My hand came up, my fingers brushing the cool platinum charm at my throat. I met his gaze. "I trust you," I whispered, "but you have to trust me, too. In that market, I give the signal, not before." He nodded, his gaze unwavering. "In the kitchen," he said, "the chef calls the pass. The heliotrope night market wasn't air, it was a meal." The atmosphere was thick, a rich stew of smells, spicy fennel from the sausage stalls, sweet wood smoke from the chestnut roasters, garlic, hot oil, and the sharp, briny tangs of the fishmongers. Hundreds of people crowded the aisles, laughing, shouting, their faces lit by the swaying paper lanterns and the raw, white light of the stall bulbs. This was my kitchen. I stood behind a massive, flat-topped grill, a banner above me reading "Moonbridge Kitchen, a Taste of Haven." It was Sketch's idea, a perfect piece of bait. My hands, slick with oil, flew. I was cooking, really cooking, tossing shrimp and vegetables, the clack of my metal spatulas against the steel. A rhythm, a heartbeat, sweat ran down my temples, gleaming on my skin. The heat from the grill was a blast furnace, but I barely felt it. I was in the zone. My focus was absolute, but underneath my shirt, the platinum teardrop necklace was a cold, heavy weight against my breastbone. "Status, Marina," Cashin's voice, a low vibration in my earpiece. I didn't look up. "Plaza is full. I've got a line of 20 people. No sign. Where are you?" "Rooftop, northeast corner," he said. "The old hotel. I have the rifle." My hands paused for a fraction of a second. "You're not there to shoot, are you?" A beat of silence. "No. I'm here to watch. The scope isn't for a shot. It's to see every twitch, every hand, every face in the crowd. I'm your eyes. Nico is in the service alley, just as you predicted. Sketch is at the main gate, watching the entrance." I took a deep breath. "Okay, I'm just cooking." I worked for another 10 minutes. The crowd noise was a roar. The smells were dizzying. I flipped a line of shrimp, the sizzle lost in the din. "Movement," Cashin's voice, suddenly sharp. "White van, no plates, turning into the service alley, fast." My heart stopped. Nico's alley. "No, the other one. The one behind the produce stalls. They're coming straight for your back." I didn't turn. I didn't panic. I just kept cooking. My hands were steady. "2 men," Cashin said, his voice a low, clipped monotone. "Exiting the vehicle, dark clothes, masks, they're moving." I felt them before I saw them. The crowd behind me parted. A sudden, cold vacuum in the river of people. "Ma'am," a man said. I turned slowly. They were there. 2 of them, they weren't huge, but they were fast. They wore black tactical vests and hard plastic masks, molded into the cruel, beaked faces of hawks, kestrel. "We just want to talk," the first one said, his voice muffled by the plastic. His hand reached for my arm. "Sorry," I said. "This batch is for the customer." I grabbed the handle of the massive, sizzling cast iron skillet I was using for the garlic. It was full of 1/2 inch of boiling peanut oil. I didn't throw it at him. I tipped it. I poured the boiling oil directly onto the open flame of the gas burner beside me. The whoomph was instantaneous. A pillar of fire, 10 feet high, shot up between us. It was a wall of pure, roaring heat. The 2 men screamed, throwing themselves backward, shielding their faces from the flash. The crowd screamed, falling back, creating a perfect 30-foot circle of empty space around my stall. "Now," I whispered. My hand went to my throat. I squeezed the platinum charm, twice, hard. The world died. The loud pop wasn't a gunshot. It was the main breaker. The entire market, every string of lights, every bare bulb, every neon sign, including the massive heliotrope sign over the plaza, went black. We were plunged into absolute, chaotic darkness. The only light came from the fires on my grill, casting wild, dancing shadows. People were screaming, blind. A second sound cut through the panic, a loud, pressurized hiss. The industrial air conditioning units on the roofs of the stalls, the ones for the fishmongers. Just as I'd planned, Nico's team had rigged them. Thick, cold CO2 smoke, designed to extinguish fires, began to pour down from the eaves, blanketing the plaza in an icy, opaque fog. It was chaos, blindness, noise. I saw a black line descend from the sky. It wasn't a man. It was a spider on a thread. Cassian, he dropped from the hotel roof, attached to a high-tension rappelling line, his feet hitting the ground in a perfect, silent crouch, his dark clothes making him invisible in the smoke. At the exact same instant, from the alley behind me, Nico emerged, a shadow detaching itself from other shadows. The two Kestrel men were disoriented. One was rubbing his eyes, blinded by the flash. The other was trying to see through the smoke, his weapon half drawn. Cassian didn't make a sound. He moved through the smoke like a phantom. I heard a thwack, a grunt. Cassian had struck the first man's arm, a precise hit to the nerve. The man's hand went numb, his weapon clattering to the pavement. The second man saw the movement and turned on Cassian, raising his own weapon. Nico was there, a clang of metal on metal. Nico had blocked the strike with a steel baton. The first man recovered, ignoring his numb arm, and lunged, not at the fighters, but at me. He knew I was the prize. He grabbed my shirt. I had my defense ready. I grabbed the heavy, steel lid of the stockpot, holding it up like a shield. He slammed into me, and I used the lid, crashing it into the side of his head. The sound was a dull bong. He grunted, stunned. Cassian was a blur. He kicked the man's feet out from under him. He spun, grabbing the wrist of the second man who was fighting Nico, twisting it, a clean, practiced disarm. 2 men down in less than 5 seconds. Stop. The voice was pure ice. It cut through the smoke, the screams, the hiss of the gas. Valeria Crest. She stepped out from behind the neighboring stall, where she must have been watching. She wasn't in a glittering dress. She was in a severe black suit, and in her hand was a small, elegant silver firearm held with perfect, steady confidence. And she was holding it, not at Cassian, not at Nico, but at me. Before I could move, she crossed the space and grabbed the back of my hair. Yanking my head back, she pressed the cold, round muzzle of the gun against my temple. "Drop them," she ordered. "Both of you, kick them away, or I will end your witness. Right here at Timai." Cassian was 10 feet away, breathing hard in the smoke. His face was a mask of cold fury. Nico was a statue. Slowly, his eyes locked on Valeria. Cassian lowered his own firearm to the ground. He nudged it away with his foot. Nico did the same. "Good boys," Valeria sneered. "You really thought a few flowers. A website you thought you could beat me with data I am the system." She began to pull me backward toward the dark alley she had come from. "Now, Mr. Alvarno, you're going to watch me take your new pet, and then you are going to go to the cot, and you are going to retract every single piece of—" Cassian looked at me. His eyes, in the chaos, in the smoke, with a gun to my head. His eyes found mine. They weren't panicked, they weren't angry, they were calm. He gave me the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. "Breathe deep, trust me." He was giving me the signal. My hand, which Valeria hadn't bothered to check, was still hanging at my side. It was inches from the stall, inches from the spice rack. I knew she was watching Cassian, the primary threat. She wasn't watching my free hand. My fingers brushed a small, open shaker. I didn't grab it. I just hooked it with one finger. "You're right, Valeria," I said, my voice shaking, but loud. "You've won." And I flung my hand backward, knocking the shaker off the shelf, sending a cloud of fine, brown powder not at her, but into the open flame of the grill. Ground cinnamon? The effect is called a dust explosion. Fwoom. It was a column of fire, a bright orange-white flash that sounded like a cannon, a massive, concussive whoosh of expanding hot air. It was bright, it was loud, and it was completely harmless, but it looked like the end of the world. Valeria screamed. It was pure, terrified instinct. She flinched, hard, shutting her eyes, turning her head away from the flashbang of fire. She loosened her grip on my hair for 1/2 of 1 second. It was all Cassian needed. He wasn't a man, and he was a projectile. He crossed the 10 feet in a single bound. He didn't go for her gun, he went for her. He hit her high, his left hand seized her gun wrist, his right arm wrapped around her body. Spinning us both, I was thrown free, stumbling to the ground. Valeria tried to bring the gun around, to fire at him. Cassian didn't fight her. He just twisted. He bent her wrist inward, a brutal, silent joint lock. He slammed her arm against the steel counter. The crack was the sound of the small silver gun breaking against the metal, not her bones. It skittered away into the darkness. He had her pinned, her arm locked behind her, her face pressed into a cutting board. He'd done it. He'd disarmed her, subdued her, and he hadn't broken his promise to Alara. And then, the sirens, loud, close. "Freeze, USD, hands on your heads now." A dozen men, not 2, swarmed the stall. They were covered in heavy black tactical gear. They had rifles. Urban Shield Directorate was emblazoned in bright, garish yellow on their backs. "Boss," Nico yelled, his voice sharp with a new panic. "The logo, it's wrong. The eagle's head is facing left. Not right, they're fake." Valeria started to laugh, a wild, high-pitched sound. "You think I came alone? I am the system." The fake USD team wasn't there to arrest. They were there to extract. They opened fire. Not at us, at the sky. The rat-tat of automatic weapons ripped through the night. The crowd, which had started to calm down, erupted into a new, pure wave of terror. People stampeded. "This way!" Cassian roared. He didn't go for Valeria. She was lost in the sea of fake cops. He grabbed my arm. "The tunnel, Marina, the tunnel." Nico provided the exit. I heard a pop hiss as he fired 2 rounds into the tires of the Kestrel van, deflating them instantly. Cassian dragged me, pulling me past the fishmonger's stall, behind the massive, humming walk-in freezers. He kicked open a metal gate, the garbage alley, the exact one I'd pointed out on the map. It was dark, narrow, and smelled of fish guts and old trash. We ran. Behind us, I heard Valeria screaming, her voice full of triumph and rage. "You're dead, Alvarno. You hear me. I'll see you in court. You're dead." We burst out of the far end of the alley into a quiet, deserted side street. The sirens, the screams, the gunfire. It was all a block away, a different world. Cassian leaned against the brick wall, pulling me against him. He was breathing hard, the adrenaline. The pure, uncut terror of the last 10 minutes hit me like a physical blow. My knees gave out. I didn't fall. He caught me, his arms wrapping around me, holding me up. He held me so tight I could barely breathe. I buried my face in his chest, my hands fisting in his shirt. I was shaking so hard I thought my teeth would crack. He was shaking, too. His hand, the one that had disarmed Valeria, was buried in my hair, holding my head against his shoulder. "You're okay," he whispered, his voice rough, unsteady. "You're okay. I've got you." He didn't let go. He just held me, his heart hammering against my ear, a frantic, wild drum. Finally, he pulled back, just enough to look at me. His hands framed my face. His eyes in the dark alley were blazing. He rested his forehead against mine. We just stood there, breathing each other's air. "She said she'll see you in court," I whispered, my voice trembling. A small, grim smile touched his lips. That, Marina, was the entire point. He closed his eyes, his forehead still pressed to mine. "We're almost there." The week after the night market was a blur of shadows. Valeria's public threat at the market, "I'll see you in court," had been her fatal mistake. It had been recorded by 24 cell phones. It was no longer a conspiracy. It was a public challenge. The Civic Oversight Tribunal, armed with our data, Valeria's own audio recording, and now a public spectacle of fake police and gunfire, had moved with unprecedented speed. The hearing was set. We weren't at Vermilion Wharf. We weren't at the Blue Lamp. We were in a secure holding room in the administrative wing of the Cott building itself. It was the night before the hearing. The room was the opposite of the attic. It was sterile, beige, and lit by a single buzzing fluorescent panel. It smelled of old paper and floor wax. There was no romance. There were just 2 cots, a small table, and a locked steel door. We were exhausted, the kind of bone-deep fatigue that goes beyond sleep. Cassian hadn't spoken in an hour. He was sitting on one cot, his elbows on his knees, staring at the linoleum floor. I was on the other, watching him. The adrenaline of the chase was gone, leaving only the quiet, heavy dread of what came next. My hand felt small and cold. I stood up, crossed the small space, and sat next to him. I didn't say anything. I just took his hand. His fingers were cold, but they laced with mine instantly. His grip tight, an anchor in the sterile, buzzing quiet. "I used to think," he said, his voice a low rasp, breaking the silence, "that fear was the only tool that worked, that you built walls, and you made the consequences of crossing them so severe that everyone stayed out. That's how you protect things." His thumb rubbed the back of my hand. "It's what I did at the cemetery. I hurt them. It's what I did for you. I put snipers on a roof. I used fear as a shield." He looked at our joined hands, and then I watched you. You didn't build a wall. You walked into a kitchen. You used a cinnamon shaker as a weapon. A small, exhausted smile touched his lips. "You took my whole violent, tactical plan and you flipped it. You made it yours. You taught me, you reminded me of something Alara always tried to tell me, that the truth, told at the right rhythm is stronger than any wall." I leaned my head against his shoulder. It felt solid. Right. "I was terrified of you," I confessed, my voice a whisper. "That day at St. Inez, you were a ghost story, the boss of the consortium. I thought all bosses were the same, men who use people like pawns, like Valeria." I turned my head, my cheek resting against the fabric of his shirt. I was wrong. Men like that, they don't shield anyone. They don't put their own bodies between a stranger and a knife. They don't take a fall on a wet bridge. You don't just protect things. Cassian, you protect people. He turned his head. Our faces were inches apart. The air was thick with our shared exhaustion, our shared fear, and something else. Something solid. "Tomorrow," he whispered, his voice rough. "Valeria will be on that stand. She will try to destroy you, to tear you apart. You don't have to do this. I can pull your testimony. We have the audio. We have the data. It's enough." I lifted my head from his shoulder. "No." The look on his face was one I hadn't seen before. Not shock, not anger, surprise. "You don't get to make that choice," I said, my voice quiet but fierce. "You don't get to shield me from this. Not this. Kestrel Valeria, they made me a ghost for 5 years. I hid in a prep kitchen. I whispered to a gravestone. Tomorrow is the day I stop whispering. Tomorrow is the day I speak." His eyes searched mine, and I saw the conflict in him, the protector versus the partner. He leaned in. The kiss was slow, it was sweet, and it was absolutely certain. It wasn't the hesitant, rain-soaked kiss from the attic. This was different. It was a promise. It was a seal. It was a quiet shared vow in a beige, fluorescent room. It was the "I'm not leaving" that we'd felt in the alley. It was the calm before the storm. "When this is over," he murmured against my lips. "I know," I breathed. "The peaceful dinner." A sharp, professional knock on the steel door made us jump apart like teenagers. The lock scraped open. It was Nico. He looked as gray with fatigue as we did, but his eyes were bright. He was holding a large, yellowed envelope. "Boss, Marina," he said, "I found something." "The sweepers?" Cassian asked, instantly back in command. "No, something else. At the Blue Lamp." Nico held up the envelope. "I did a final sweep of the attic, like you asked. It was in the piano, taped to the underside of the soundboard. He handed it to Cassian. It was addressed in a familiar, elegant script. To Cassian. Cassian's hands, the ones that had disarmed men and held me through a storm, were visibly shaking. He stared at the envelope. It was from Alara. He opened it. The paper inside was brittle, the ink slightly faded. He began to read aloud, his voice thick, stumbling over the words he thought he'd never hear again. "My dearest Cassian," he read, "if you are reading this, it means the worst has happened. It means my luck and my time have run out. But it also means you are still here. You are still fighting. And I hope it means you still believe in decent things." He had to stop, his throat closing. He took a ragged breath. I put my hand on his arm. He covered my hand with his, gripping it, and continued. "I know your heart, my love. I know your truest instinct will be to burn them to the ground, to take all that protective fire I love so much and turn it into vengeance, to salt the earth so that nothing like what they did to Haven Row can ever grow again." His voice broke. He held the paper out. "I can't, Marina, you—" I took the letter from his trembling hand. I was crying, the tears rolling silently down my cheeks. "I am begging you," I read, my voice as shaky as his. "Don't let me be the ashes in your heart. Don't let my memory become a monument of vengeance. That fire, it's too bright for that. It's too warm. Take that fire, my Cassian, please, and build a warm kitchen for someone who is cold." The letter ended. There was no signature. It didn't need one. We sat in silence. The fluorescent light buzzed. "A warm kitchen," I whispered, the tears dripping onto my hands. I looked up at him. That's what she wanted. Not revenge, a kitchen. He looked at me, his eyes full of a grief so profound I felt it in my own chest. But under the grief there was a spark, a purpose. "The banner," he said, his voice hoarse, "at the night market." "Moonbridge Kitchen," I said, a small, watery laugh bubbling in my chest. She was trying to tell us. "We'll build it," he said. It wasn't a question, it was a vow. When this is done, we build it. The moment was so pure, so clear, that the sound of Nico clearing his throat felt like a violation. "Boss," Nico said quietly, "we have another problem. Kestrel's last play." He turned on a small tablet. It was the 11 o'clock news, a breaking story. An anonymous source close to the Alvarno consortium claiming that I wasn't a witness, that I was Cassian's disgruntled mistress, that I'd been paid off to fabricate the entire Haven Row story to help him in a turf war. They were trying to poison the jury. They were trying to discredit me before I even spoke. Cassian stood up. The sound he made was not human. It was a low, animal growl of pure rage. "That's it. I'm pulling you. I won't let her." "No." I stood up facing him. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, hard anger that matched his. "You don't see, do you? This is good. She's desperate. She's out of moves. She's just throwing rocks. I spent 5 years letting them make me a ghost. I am not going to let them make me a whore." I straightened my shoulders. "I'm testifying. Let her try." Nico held up a single, folded piece of paper. "This was delivered to the wharf 2 hours ago. It's from Valeria." Cassian took it. He read it and then, to my astonishment, he smiled. It was the saddest, coldest smile I had ever seen. "What?" I asked. "It's an ultimatum," he said. "She says to withdraw the evidence. She says, if you or your witness even set foot on the tribunal steps, you won't leave them alive." He crumpled the note. "She's still playing by the old rules. She's still trying to use fear." He walked to the beige wall, as if he could see through it, to the city beyond. "She'll have her men watching the front steps all night. She's forgotten that in this city. Justice sometimes has to take the service elevator." The sun came up. It was a gray, heavy light that filtered through the room's single, frosted window. I hadn't slept. Neither had he. I was dressed in a simple, dark blue dress, conservative, strong under the collar. The platinum teardrop rested against my skin. Cassian stood in the doorway, dressed in his armor, the charcoal gray suit, perfectly pressed. A distant, muffled sound echoed through the building, a bell, then another. 8 o'clock, I whispered. He nodded. Sant Inez, calling us in. Nico opened the locked steel door. It led to a long, concrete utility corridor, lit by safety lights, the service elevator to the courthouse. My hand went to my throat. I didn't squeeze. I just held the necklace. The panic button had become my good luck charm. It was a reminder of the fire, the fear, and the man who had stood beside me. Cassian saw the gesture. He reached out, his hand covering mine for a single second, his fingers warm against my own. He didn't say, "I'll protect you." He didn't say, "I'll be right there." He just asked, "Ready, partner." I looked down the long, concrete hall at the heavy double doors at the end. On the other side, Valeria, the court, the end of the line. I took a deep breath and let it out. I've been ready for 5 years. The service elevator doors opened, not into a lobby, but directly into the back of the courtroom. It was packed. Every seat was taken. Reporters lined the walls, their cameras dark, not yet permitted to film. The air was dead, heavy, and smelled of floor polish and anxiety. Nico and 2 other men, all in dark suits, flanked us. Cassian put his hand on the small of my back and guided me to a heavy wooden table at the front. We sat. Across the room, at another table, sat Valeria Crest. She was in an immaculate, severe white suit, her silver blonde hair pulled back. She looked serene, confident. She met my gaze and gave me a slow, cruel smile that said, "You are already dead." Cassian's hand, resting on the table, found mine underneath it. His grip was steel. "All rise," a bailiff called out. The chief arbiter of the Civic Oversight Tribunal, a man in his 70s named Judge Harlan, entered. He looked less like a judge and more like a high school principal who had seen it all. He sat, his robes rustling, and peered over his spectacles at the packed room. "Good morning," he said, his voice dry as old paper. "This is a public hearing, not a theater. We are not here to debate rumors or opinions." He looked directly at Valeria's lawyer, then at us. "In this room, we've only 2 things evidence, and more evidence. Let's begin." Valeria's lawyer went first. He was slick, and he built a castle of paper. He presented the legitimate permits for the Kestrel warehouse, all signed and stamped by the Harbor Compliance Office. He showed the inspection reports from the Metropolitan Integrity Directorate that had shut down Haven Row, citing critical imminent fire hazards. "It's all quite clear," the lawyer concluded with a shrug. "The consortium is upset about a legitimate business competitor, and Miss Vale is a troubled young woman, lashing out at the agencies that had to shut down her unsafe kitchen. This is a waste of the tribunal's time." "Is it?" Judge Harlan murmured. "Miss Vale, you're up." My legs felt like water. Cassian squeezed my hand once, hard, and let go. I walked to the witness stand. I took the oath. "Miss Vale," the tribunal's counsel began, "you claim these documents, the ones that shut down Haven Row, were fraudulent." "They were," I said, my voice clear. It didn't even shake. "And these permits," he gestured to Valeria's pile, "the ones for the Kestrel warehouse, you claim they are also fraudulent. On what grounds?" I looked at the judge. "Sir, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a cook, but in my kitchen. I know when an ingredient is bad. I need to show you." I pointed. "I need you to turn on a UV light, a strong one, and I need to see those documents, all of them side by side." Valeria, for the first time, looked annoyed. Her lawyer objected. "This is theatrics." "I like theatrics," Judge Harlan said, waving a hand. "Dim the lights, bring in the scanner." They did. The room was plunged into a semi-darkness. A technician brought a portable UV scanner over the evidence table. "There," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. I stood, pointing. "The Haven Row fire report, and there the Kestrel warehouse permit. Look at the watermark, the heron." On the screen, the 2 glowing birds were projected. "They're identical," Valeria's lawyer sneered. their standard government issue. No, I said. They're not. Zoom in. On the left wing, the seventh feather. The technician zoomed, and there it was. On both documents, glowing like a poison, was the tiny, microscopic break in the line, the ridge 7 flaw, a signature. A gasp went through the courtroom. The same illegal, high-security press, I said, was used to create a fake fire report and a legitimate $30 million port permit. They're both forgeries. Valeria Crest signed them both. Valeria's face was white. But that, I said, turning to the 3 arbiters, isn't the story. That's just the data. And I told them. I told them everything. I told them about Alara Alvarno. I didn't paint her as a saint. I painted her as a woman who cussed like a sailor and carried old ladies on her back. I told them about the kitchen, about the mint tea, about the promise. Valeria Crest and the men who worked for her at the MID and the HCO, I said, my voice ringing with an anger I'd held for 5 years. They didn't just shut down a building. They turned off a light. They took a warm place and turned it into ashes. For money. For influence. I looked at the reporters, at the crowded gallery. I'm not a mistress. I'm not a victim. I'm a prep cook, and I'm here to keep a promise I made to my friend. I'm here because this city needs its warm kitchens. A heavy silence filled the room. It was broken by a bell, a loud, clanging alarm. Shouts erupted from the hallway outside. A man in the gallery yelled, "They're in the building! They're coming up the stairs!" Valeria smiled. Her composure was back. She looked at Cassian, her moment of triumph. Her USD team was here. A bailiff burst in. "Judge, the front door is a tactical team. They're not our guys." Cassian didn't move. He didn't reach for a weapon. He just looked at Valeria, and his expression was one of pity. He stood up. "Judge Harlan." The old man, who was the only person in the room who didn't look panicked, peered at Cassian. "This had better be good, Mr. Alvarno. We're a bit busy." "It is," Cassian said. He handed Nico's small audio player to the clerk. "Valeria Crest is right. I am a man who has operated in the shadows. But she is a woman who corrupts the light. Please, play this." The clerk hit the button. Valeria's voice, cold and hissing, filled the courtroom. "I don't care about the flowers. I don't care about the website. I can handle the truth. What I'm afraid of is the truth being told at the right tempo." Judge Harlan listened. He nodded. "The tempo. I like that." Valeria was on her feet. "This is a fabrication. This is—" Boom! The doors to the courtroom shuddered as if hit by a ram. Judge Harlan ignored it. He pressed a large red button under his dais. "Sergeant," he said into a microphone, "we have a confirmed security breach. Activate Protocol 4. Call the Civic Guard." A sound like a guillotine. Heavy steel shutters, ones I hadn't even seen, slammed down over the windows and the main doors, sealing us in. The thud as they locked was final. "What is that?" Valeria's lawyer stammered. "That, counsel," the judge said, "is a little-known city ordinance, the Civic Guard of Ordnance, a volunteer-based, fully militarized force, chartered in 1884, to be called only in the event of a direct armed assault on the tribunal itself. They've been waiting for this. Your client's friends," he nodded to the now silent doors, "are locked out. Please, continue." Valeria looked trapped. Her eyes darted around the room. And then, the final twist. A young man, a junior arbiter I'd seen taking notes at the end of the bench, stood up, and he was maybe 30. He calmly unclipped his SIOT identification. "Thank you, Judge," he said. "I think my team can take it from here." He reached into his jacket and produced a different badge, a gold one. "Special Agent Marks, Bureau of Harbor Ethics. We've been investigating the GCC's grant laundering scheme for 6 months. We're grateful to Miss Vale and Mr. Alvarno for providing the final piece." 3 other people in the gallery, 2 men and a woman I'd assumed were reporters, stood up. They were BHE. They moved toward Valeria and toward the pale, sweating directors of the MID and the HCO, who were sitting in the front row. "You can't," Valeria whispered, her face crumbling. I am the system. No, Agent Marks said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. You're just a criminal. Valeria Crest, you're under arrest. She lunged, not for an agent, for the side door, the one we'd come through. I was there first. I just stepped in front of it. She stopped, her face inches from mine. The pure, unadulterated hatred in her eyes was terrifying. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. You used the law to kill a kitchen. Valeria, I said quietly. Today, the law is claiming its debt. She raised her hand to strike me. Valeria, Cashin's voice low and final. She froze, and he was standing right behind her. He hadn't moved to help me. He knew I didn't need it. Alara believed in building bridges, so he said, his voice soft but carrying. You only know how to destroy them. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and then he just turned his back. He walked away from her, back to me. It was the most profound dismissal I had ever seen. Agent Marks took her arm. She didn't fight. She was broken. The Gulf Coast News, which had been forced to air the hearing live, had just broadcast every second of it. The truth, told at the right tempo. As they led her away, we could hear the roar from the crowds outside. The Civic Guard had arrived. They were cheering. We left an hour later. The sun was bright, the air washed clean. We didn't go to the wharf. We didn't go to the spire. We went back to St. Inez. It was quiet. The crowds were gone. Just the two of us and the city of the dead. We stood in front of Alara's grave. The pile of morning glories from the podcast listeners was huge. We added our own small purple bouquet. We did it, Alara, I whispered, my hand finding Cassian's. We turned the ashes into a kitchen. He was quiet for a long time. Then he reached into his suit jacket, not for a gun, not for a letter. He pulled out a ring. It was simple, a band of brushed platinum. He didn't kneel. He just turned to me, his dark eyes serious. All the shadows of the past few weeks gone, replaced by a clear, steady light. He took my left hand and pressed the ring into my palm. I won't ask, he said, his voice rough. Not like that. This is your choice. No debt, no fear. You don't have to answer today. You don't have to answer ever. I want you to have it. I looked at the ring. It was heavy and warm from his pocket. I saw the engraving on the inside. One word, Moonbridge. I closed my hand around it. I looked up at him, at this man who had shielded me with his body, who had listened to my stories, who had learned to chop an onion. I smiled. I choose the peaceful dinner. I said, I'm holding you to it. Vermilion Wharf wasn't a fortress anymore. 2 months later, the steel doors were rolled open. The black SUVs were gone. In their place were long wooden tables and a stainless steel serving line. The old scorched sign from Haven Row hung on the brick wall, a rescued, honored piece of art. Above the main door, a new, beautifully carved wooden sign read Moonbridge Kitchen. It was opening night. The gumbo was simmering a 20-gallon pot this time. The smell of fennel and sautéed garlic and baking bread filled the cavernous space. Onions, chef, a voice said. I turned. Cassian was at the main prep table, a white apron tied neatly over his shirt. He pushed a perfectly diced, massive bowl of onions toward me. His eyes weren't even red. Not bad, I said, trying to sound critical. You're getting faster. I'm a quick study, he said, a small smile playing on his lips. He came around the prep table. He untied my apron strings, just to retie them. His hands lingered at my waist. The room is full, he murmured, his breath warm in my ear. They're hungry, I murmured back. So am I. He turned me around, and in the middle of our kitchen, surrounded by the steam and the clatter of pots and the smell of our future, he kissed me. It was slow and warm, and it tasted like home. Later that night, long after the last guest had left, we were on the docks, looking out at the river. The city lights were a smear of color on the water. I was leaning against him, his arm securely around my shoulders. Do we still go to St. Inez? I asked, my voice quiet. Do we still bring her flowers on Sunday? He was silent for a moment. He kissed the top of my head. Yes, he said, and Monday and Tuesday. He pulled me closer. Any day you want. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Please, drop a comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this ride, don't forget to subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help us share this story with even more people.